All of this death, it's all my fault. I just stood by and let it happen. I had an army at my command. I don't care what they are. The point is, I could have used them. I could have stopped this from happening. People paid the price for my arrogance. Today on the Comic Book Report, Daredevil Shadowland Omnibus. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm back with another Marvel Omnibus review. That's right, we're looking at my favorite comic book character, Daredevil, and this is the Shadowland Omnibus. One of the most divisive and unique runs in modern Daredevil history, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it today. Before we do though, I want to say a special thank you and shout out to our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, you can check out their website. There's a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, The Comic Book Report, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's Omnibus review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written primarily by Andy Diggle, Anthony Johnston, Zeb Wells, and more, and penciled primarily by Billy Tan, Roberto Della Torre, Marco Cacchetto, and more. The comics in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2009. The volume itself collects Dark Reign, The List, Daredevil One-Shot, Daredevil issues 501 through 512, Shadowland issues 1 through 5, Shadowland Elektra, Shadowland Bullseye, Shadowland Ghost Rider, Shadowland Spider-Man, Shadowland After the Fall, Shadowland Moon Knight issues 1 through 3, Shadowland Blood on the Streets issues 1 through 4, Shadowland Daughters of the Shadow issue 1 through 3, Shadowland Powerman issues 1 through 4, Thunderbolts issues 148 and 149, and Daredevil Reborn issues 1 through 4. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover edition with nice glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 1,112 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and give a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and without further ado, here's our first look at that Omnibus edition. I will say right from the jump, this is the direct market cover for this Omnibus. I'll throw up a quick thumbnail of the standard edition just so you can compare the two and decide which you prefer. I honestly love this direct market where we have Daredevil kind of falling through the circles, just looking really sharp. I believe they lifted this from the cover of Dark Reign, The List, Daredevil, but yeah, it looks really good. Transitioning to the spine, I really love it. We have a dark background with the Daredevil red with Shadowland, and then our image on the bottom is Elektra. I believe the standard edition has Daredevil in some form as the picture on the bottom, but I think Elektra is a really nice choice for this omnibus, and overall I have no complaints about the spine design. I think this is a really well-made omnibus dust jacket. And the back cover, we have a nice kind of building with Daredevil jumping down, blurb about the book, the contents, pricing information, also a parental advisory. That's due to the dark nature, violence, things like that we can expect within the pages of this book. But yeah, the back cover looks really crisp. I like that it's dark, and like I said, I think overall the dust jacket design on this book was really well done. I'm really happy with how it looks. To that end, let's actually spend one more minute on the exteriors. We're going to be looking at the dust jacket in greater detail. This time I'll show you those interior flaps. We got some more about the book, creators, things like that, and some characters. And then we'll just examine the dust jacket one last time before we transition to the under the dust jacket artwork that's printed on the book. Here's that dust jacket again. I just really like it. Like I said, this is the direct market cover. I'm sure the standard is quite nice as well, but I definitely favor this. I think it looks really clean. Now, as we transition to the Under the Dust Jacket hardback book itself, we do have a stamped piece of art that is a full wrap around for this hardback book, which is exciting. Just a really epic kind of battle scene from the pages of this omnibus, blown up and just stamped across the book. I thought this was a really nice touch. You know, we don't have any text, anything else beyond the art, but it is nice to see the full wraparound. Overall, like I said, a really well-designed book here from Marvel. And now that we've completed our look at the exteriors, let's transition to a brief look at the binding. So for all those prospective collectors out there, this is how my book was bound, and I could not have been happier. It is sewn binding, and we have a gigantic eye. The pages lay nearly flat, very little to no gutter loss. Honestly, this book read like a dream. I was so happy to see the binding. One of the best I've had in a Marvel Omnibus in some time. Okay, now that we've talked about the book, the build, everything like that, we can go ahead and start making our way into the collection proper. After the red end pages, we have a nice title page, and then a full kind of creator page that outlines what's collected in this book. After that, we go directly into the first issue of this omnibus, which is that Dark Reign, the List Daredevil. And now before we go any further, I want to do a little bit more context about this book. So this book collects the entire Andy Diggle run on Daredevil, which finishes out this volume on Daredevil. After this, we actually have the Mark Waid run on Daredevil, kicking off with a new issue 1. Yes, this is what caps that Daredevil volume number that began all the way back with Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil and went on and on. For those that don't know, immediately preceding this run, we had the incredible run by Ed Brubaker. I actually just reviewed the Daredevil by Ed Brubaker Omnibus Volume 2 not too long ago on the channel if you're interested in seeing that. That leads directly into the events of the Shadowland Omnibus. So that's where this run takes place, but this omnibus collects far more than just the Daredevil run itself, and even the Shadowland event, which also occurs kind of in tandem with the last couple issues of Daredevil here. As you heard a couple minutes ago, I went through the full listing, but essentially we have those 12 issues or so of Daredevil that end the volume by Andy Diggle. We have the 5-issue Shadowland event, which is the Daredevil-centric kind of street-level hero event. And then we have all the tie-ins through Shadowland, and we also have Daredevil Reborn. So this book has just a ton of different things. It's not just the Andy Diggle Daredevil run, but I believe it's the only way to get that run collected in oversized hardcover format. Now, this book is mapped kind of interestingly. I don't think there was a better way to map it, but I do want to talk about that briefly as well. Essentially, we start with Dark Reign, the List, Daredevil, which is perfect. It kind of leads us into what Andy Diggle is going to do on the Daredevil title itself, and it kicks off kind of the events that occur directly after the end of Ed Brubaker's run, where Matt Murdock, Daredevil, takes over leadership of the Hand. Basically, from there, we go through the Daredevil issues, I think 501 through about 511, but throughout those issues, we're kind of braiding it with the Shadowland events. So you'll have an issue or two of Daredevil, then one of Shadowland, then Daredevil, then Shadowland. It kind of reminds me of what I saw Donny Cates' Venom, toward the end where we'd get issues of Venom and King in Black, which was an event that kind of was the culmination of that run. I think that was all fine. However, after the issue 511 of Daredevil, which is near the end of it, and the Shadowland event, we then go into all of the tie-off issues that collect that have to do with Shadowland. And this is where chronologically things just get a little funny, because some of these tie-ins take place in the middle of Shadowland, before Shadowland, directly after Shadowland, or anywhere in between. So from here, the chronology gets a little skewed, but at this point you have at least read those early Daredevil issues and Shadowland, so you kind of logically know where these issues must take place. And again, I don't think there was a better way to do that, because if you tried to put these tie-in issues where they occur chronologically between Daredevil and Shadowland, you'd be breaking issues in half, and you'd really kill the momentum of the event and the Daredevil run. So again, I don't think the mapping is bad. I see this with a lot of event omnibuses as well. House of M Omnibus did the same thing. We have the main event and all the tie-ins after. I do think that the main Daredevil issues in Shadowland are probably some of the better issues in this omnibus. The tie-ins weren't bad. I think they were of varied quality, but it kind of jumped around all over the place. And some of the tie-ins were very closely linked to Shadowland or Daredevil, but some felt very remote or kind of doing their own thing, or you're just aware that you're in New York during Shadowland, but they're having their own kind of mysteries happening, and we follow a lot of the street level vigilante characters across the Marvel Universe. I did like it because I think we got a great snapshot of what's happening in the city and in the Marvel Universe at the time, and certainly if you like the street level heroes like Daredevil, Powerman, Iron Fist, things like that, this is a great omnibus to just see more from that vantage point following those kinds of characters. But I think at a certain point you get lost in these tie-ins and you kind of lose sight of the fact that this is a Daredevil omnibus, because whole issues will go by and you won't even see them. Anyway, after all the tie-ins, we have the final issue of Daredevil, issue 512. We have Shadowland After the Fall, which is kind of an epilogue. And then we have Daredevil Reborn, which is a 4-issue miniseries that bridges the gap between everything that happened after Shadowland with Matt Murdock into what we get next with Mark Waid. It's kind of this interesting epilogue, prologue, palate cleanser, and kind of a re-establishment of what the status quo will be. And that's really how this book is mapped. You have some extras at the back, which we'll talk about, but that's the setup for the book. Now let's talk a bit about the story. So as I mentioned earlier, this takes place after Ed Brubaker's tenure on the title. Now where that run ended up, as I mentioned, is Daredevil has taken over the Hand, which is kind of that evil clan of ninjas, and his idea is that he essentially can steer them from within to do good for the city of Hell's Kitchen and beyond. And what we have here during Andy Diggle's time with Daredevil is him slowly, and sometimes not so slowly, getting corrupted by the influence of the Hand and beyond to become kind of an evil villain over the course of these issues. We know Matt has good intentions, but throughout this run we just see him plunging further into darkness. We have basically a terrorist attack at the beginning of this book by Bullseye, who basically blows up a tenement building in Hell's Kitchen, killing I think 107 people. Daredevil feels responsible. He has the army of the Hand behind him, and he does nothing to stop Bullseye before this attack occurs. And in his anger, Daredevil actually executes Bullseye on television, and this event ultimately leaves him open to the Hand's influence, and he just becomes kind of taken over by the Hand and its kind of villainous entity, and he just gets corrupted, and we get to see his fall from grace essentially, and we have Daredevil just going further and further into the depths. After what Bullseye did, killing all those people, Daredevil actually erects a kind of giant castle, kind of a Japanese-inspired pagoda-looking castle, right over where that explosion occurred, over where the building was, where the remains of the people were, and he calls this castle essentially Shadowland, and he basically lives there with his ninjas, and he kind of pledges to keep Hell's Kitchen safer. He dispatches his ninjas to do his work. He gathers up corrupt cops and people, puts them in his dungeon beneath the castle, and he kind of just becomes darker and darker. He does more and more sketchy things. His ninjas are kind of taking more liberties. He's starting to expand his territory, and this is about when the other heroes around New York start to just say, "What's going on, Matt?" And Matt gets an audience with them, things go sideways, and this is where kind of the Shadowland event happens as well, where we have the street level heroes and vigilantes, characters like Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Moon Knight and Ghost Rider and Spider-Man and Elektra, and all these people show up to basically try to stop Matt Murdock. Throughout Shadowland 2, we have a couple other heroes, like Wolverine even shows up, which is fun. But yeah, we basically have all of these heroes battling Matt Murdock. He has not only the Hand, but he has a corrupted White Tiger. We have Black Tarantula. We have him kind of getting dispatched in these pages. But he even teams up with Typhoid Mary at one point. and it's sort of like Daredevil and his army versus the heroes. Behind the scenes, we also have Kingpin working with Lady Bullseye, who was introduced in the Ed Brubaker run. We basically have Kingpin trying to pull the strings from the background, having Daredevil and the Hand and the heroes duke it out, and the Kingpin kind of hopes he just picks up the pieces and jumps in on the power vacuum. But we have the Kingpin at one point with Marvel's heroes, kind of trying to advise him, saying Daredevil's been corrupted, we have to stop him, and that leads to all sorts of other ethical questions for the heroes, kind of allying with Kingpin, but we all know he's up to no good. But anyway, this is where the front half of this omnibus goes, those Daredevil issues, the Shadowland events, and it culminates with basically Elektra being able to break into Matt's head briefly to kind of show him his corruption. Matt sort of sacrifices himself to take himself off the board, and then his body disappears before too long, with Elektra giving kind of a knowing look. And after that, basically Shadowland is done, and we go pretty much directly into all the tie-in issues. And we hop around here. Like I said, we have a lot of these Shadowland one-shots following some of these other heroes, like Spider-Man or Ghost Rider or Elektra. But then we have some that have multiple issues, like the Shadowland Moon Knight, I think, had 3. We have Powerman for the Shadowland issues being a 4-issue series that follow a new Powerman. Things like that. So we jump around with all of these different tie-in issues for a while, and these are really fascinating because they really all do different things. Like, we have Moon Knight on this quest to find this crescent-shaped artifact that is believed to basically purge the corruption out of Daredevil's soul, and it's a 3-issue arc, but we also have him kind of doing his own personal problems. It really feels like a Moon Knight story that's just tangentially, linked to Shadowland because he's trying to find this artifact. So I think if you've never read Moon Knight, it can be a bit jarring because it feels so loosely connected to Daredevil. And honestly, some of the issues just feel like that. On the other hand, we have Spider-Man's Shadowland tie-in issue, and it's kind of like Spider-Man and Shang-Chi teaming up to get a lead on what's going on, but it ends up with them kind of fighting Mr. Negative, which was a fun issue, honestly, I thought. There's really a ton of tie-in issues. I'm not going to spend time doing a review of every single issue in this omnibus. Suffice it to say, you get a lot of variety. I know one that's kind of interesting is the Blood on the Streets tie-in issues. It's like, I think, a 4-issue arc. It primarily follows Misty Knight, but we have real notable appearances, kind of an ensemble cast in that miniseries with characters like Paladin, the Shroud, Silver Sable. So they make kind of a weird team trying to figure out who's really behind some of what's going on in Hell's Kitchen. Basically, there's these murders that look like the Hand, but a lot of these characters aren't convinced it is the Hand, but that there's some other force that's using everything going on with Shadowland to kind of have a scapegoat. And it's really interesting because we have these 4 sort of playing detective, trying to get to the bottom of all these murders. We also have the Hand trying to vindicate itself and not be used dishonorably like that. And then we have, whoever's maybe perpetrating these murders. This was a really fun kind of whodunit, and these are real street-level characters, some of them kind of tertiary characters. I honestly wasn't even sure who Paladin was. I had to look it up. I had seen him maybe once or twice, but I just wasn't familiar. Another one that was kind of cool is Daughters of the Shadow. This is like, I think, a 3-issue Shadowland tie-in that follows Colleen Wing, and she basically gets recruited by this corrupted Daredevil to lead this team of women assassins to do all of these missions on behalf of Daredevil. She's kind of blackmailed into it, or she is kind of extorted, or anyway, Daredevil's trying to kind of pull her strings, and we have her really trying to figure out who she is, who she stands for, and what she's really fighting for. This was a fun 3-issue series as well. As a fan of like Powerman and Iron Fist, honestly, some of these characters, or these miniseries rather, that follow Misty Knight and Colleen Wing were kind of a joy to me because I really enjoyed those characters, so I had a lot of fun with that. I know I read the Iron Fist early years omnibus, so I got to know quite a bit more about Misty Knight and Colleen Wing. Anyway, after that, we also have the Powerman Shadowland miniseries. This was interesting. It introduced a new Powerman, or at least I think this is where he was introduced. And he's basically the son of a Luke Cage villain. But he shows up and he has some abilities that seem reminiscent of both Luke Cage and Iron Fist. Luke Cage and Iron Fist are both in this miniseries, but it's just kind of an interesting spin-off that's all occurring around Shadowland as well. This is another one that doesn't feel overly connected, but it's, again, a street-level story that's happening during the events of Shadowland. 2 issues of Thunderbolts were also included here. This is when Thunderbolts reported to Luke Cage. These issues were fun as well. We basically have them breaking into the dungeons of Shadowland. It was just like a 2-issue little run here, but this one I at least felt like was more connected to the actual Shadowland event. I'm not sure if that was all of them. Like I said, I'm bouncing around a little bit. These aren't even exactly the order they came in, just ones I was thinking about, so I'm speaking about. Anyway, after we get through the tie-ins, we transition to the Daredevil issue 512, which is kind of the epilogue issue after the events of Shadowland, and we basically have sort of what happens next. What happened to some of these characters? What's the fallout for all the secondary characters like Foggy Nelson, Ben Ulrich, things like that. And it's sort of the dust settling in Hell's Kitchen afterward. We have implications that T'Challa, the Black Panther, has become kind of the new guardian of Hell's Kitchen while Daredevil's away, which is fascinating. We have people kind of looking for Matt Murdock or what happened. And this issue honestly goes very well with the Shadowland After the Fall issue, which comes directly after issue 512. This is another kind of epilogue, and it's sort of all the characters getting into their positions and, again, kind of reflecting on everything that happened with Shadowland. There's also a lot in that issue that follow Ben Ulrich and Foggy, kind of talking about Matt's influence and ultimately that Daredevil did some good here. We also find out conclusively that Daredevil is still alive. He actually made a tape-recorded message for Ben Ulrich, basically saying he has to, like, find himself and don't tell Foggy. And we have Elektra confronting Ben Ulrich, basically saying, like, yes, like, we brought him back, and I know the road he's walking right now, and he needs to be left alone. And we basically have Matt getting on a bus in the middle of nowhere and kind of getting off the bus in the middle of nowhere and sort of drifting. And that's where the Daredevil run proper with 512 and Shadowland After the Fall end us out. We just have him kind of adrift in the middle of nowhere. From there, the omnibus ends with the 4-issue miniseries Daredevil Reborn. And it's basically Matt as a drifter. He gets kind of caught into this, kind of villainous act, and he ultimately has to do something about it. He's sort of reluctant at first, and ultimately he shapes up and kind of steps up into who he knows he is. And that ends up with him reuniting with Foggy at the end and, essentially saying it's time to get back to work. And we know from that point on, we go into the Mark Waid era of Daredevil. And that story-wise is kind of a shape of what happens over the course of this omnibus. Now, switching over to the art for a second, we have a lot of great artists throughout this book, like Billy Tan, that just had a really kind of dark, graphic, intense look to the artwork, which I loved. Another notable here is Marco Caccetto. If you thought that he just began work on Daredevil with the Chip Zdarsky era, you'd be wrong. There's a lot of issues here with art from Marco Caccetto, and seeing his Daredevil before Zdarsky was a real treat, because it's immediately recognizable as Caccetto's Daredevil, and that is a pairing I loved later on in that Zdarsky era. And to see issues penciled by him during this Andy Diggle era was just a real treat in this omnibus. I will say, throughout all of the tie-ins things too, we have so many different illustrators on this book. I liked some to varying degrees over others, but overall I think the art direction was quite strong. I did prefer most of all the artists we had attached to the proper Daredevil issues. I preferred that over the Shadowland artists and all the tie-in artists, if I'm honest. But yeah, the main Daredevil issues were some of my favorite art in this collection. The Shadowland Elektra was also pretty notable for me. But yeah, all pretty good stuff. The last thing I wanted to mention about this omnibus before we give the grade is all of the extras we have included at the back. It's worth noting that this collection probably has the best and most generous section of extras I've seen in an omnibus in some time. We not only have a great variant cover art gallery, we also have behind the scenes transcribed interviews with Andy Diggle, the penciler. We have character biographies, breakdowns in the back of this. We have things about the run written out. We have great kind of character models, sketches. We have a script for a Daredevil Reborn issue. We just have a ton. Honestly, there are so many extras at the back of this book. And as a Daredevil fan, I was delighted. Not only if you enjoy Daredevil, but if you like a lot of the street level characters, these extras are just fantastic. I cannot speak highly enough about it. I was really blown away by the caliber of extras in this collection. And now let's give Daredevil Shadowland Omnibus a grade. While the Andy Diggle run on Daredevil was not historically my favorite, I will say I enjoyed these issues more upon rereading. The omnibus as a whole, though really well made with incredible extras, I felt like was a bit overinflated with too many tie-ins that didn't really feel that related. Though I am a fan of bigger books, I felt like at a certain point I lost sight of the core storyline. For these reasons, the Comic Book Report is going to give Daredevil Shadowland Omnibus a B-. I still think this is an above average collection, and I had a lot of fun reading through it. It's by no means my favorite run on Daredevil, but it is nice to fill a hole in my Omnibus Daredevil collection. If you're interested in the street level Daredevil heroes, this might still be worth picking up, and I know all Daredevil completionists out there are eyeballing this collection. But let me know what you think of the Daredevil Shadowland Omnibus, and thank you so much for watching. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, comment, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks so much. Have a good one.